Welcome to our continuing journey looking at each of the individual parts of this place. Yes, we're back at the Tower of London, and as we all know, that's the White Tower we've covered before, but today we're going to the Bloody Tower. Now this is almost as famous as going to the White Tower, the Crown Jewels, or into the torture section. So let's go into the Bloody Tower to tell you more about it and how it got its name. But before we go in, let's have a look around this courtyard garden. And the reason why this is so important is one of the most famous inhabitants of the Bloody Tower, and was kept prisoner here for many years, was Sir Walter Raleigh. And he grew his own garden where he used a lot of the herbs and a lot of the plants for medicinal purposes. So this courtyard garden here has been recreated with some of the plants that he grew at the time. And we find out more information as we go around. Now, whilst there were some common plants native to the UK, he also grew exotic plants which he'd become interested in during his adventures in South America, which he used those medicinal ingredients to produce all sorts of things. Sir Walter Raleigh is probably one of the most famous people imprisoned at the Tower of London, and this is because in 1591 Raleigh secretly married Elizabeth Beth Throckmorton. She was one of the Queen's ladies in waiting, and because this was done in secret, about a year after, the Queen discovered the unauthorised marriage and ordered Raleigh to be imprisoned and Bess dismissed from the court. Both were imprisoned here in the Tower of London in June 1592. Now, Sir Walter Raleigh was released from prison in August 1592 to manage a recently returned expedition and an attack on the Spanish coast. As a result of successfully sorting out this attack on the Spanish coast, they captured an incredibly rich prize, which was a merchant ship. Raleigh was then sent to organise and divide the spoils of the ship. He was then sent back to the Tower, but in early 1593 he was released and became a Member of Parliament, and it took several years before Raleigh returned to favour with Queen Elizabeth. Now, whilst he'd found favour with Queen Elizabeth I, unfortunately she died in March 1603, and Raleigh was arrested in July later that year at what is now the Old Exeter Inn in Ashburton, and he was charged with treason for his involvement in the main plot against Elizabeth's successor, James I, and imprisoned again in the Tower of London. In the trial against Raleigh, he decided to defend himself, but through a trial he was cross-examined and he was convicted, but King James spared his life. We'll come back to Sir Walter Raleigh in a minute, but here you can see the top of the portcullis, which was used as one of the main gateways into the inner part of the Tower of London, and you would have passed through that if you came through Charter's Gate, which of course led you by boat from the Thames and in. Now, here we're inside the living quarters, the living room of Sir Walter Raleigh, and this is the area he used when he was based in here, well, the several times we've mentioned already. Now, this room has been kept dark to give you a flavour for what it would have been like at that time. Don't forget there's brilliant sunshine out there, plus also to preserve some of the furniture and stuff that's in here as well. Now, it was while he was imprisoned here in the Tower in this very room, Raleigh wrote his incomplete The History of the World. He used a wide array of sources in 6 languages, and Raleigh was kept fully abreast of the latest continental scholarship. Now, he wrote not only about England, but of the ancient world with a heavy emphasis on geography. So despite the fact that he had an intention of providing current advice to the King of England, King James I, the King complained that it was too saucy in censoring princes, and Raleigh remained imprisoned in the Tower until 1616. In 1617, Raleigh was pardoned by the King and granted permission to conduct a second expedition to Venezuela in search of El Dorado. So not only have you got his furniture, but you've also got some of the instruments he used to circumnavigate the world, and you're actually encouraged to touch these and turn them around. So you think Raleigh got away from it, all was much better in the world? Well, unfortunately, a condition of Raleigh's pardon was the avoidance of any hostility against Spanish colonies or shipping. Unfortunately, he got involved in an attack which had happened whilst he was overseas on a Spanish fleet. When he came back, the Spanish ambassador then demanded that Raleigh's death sentence be reinstated by King James, who had little choice but to do so. Raleigh was brought from Plymouth to London, had several chances to escape, but didn't take so. Raleigh was beheaded in the old palace yard at the Palace of Westminster in October 1618, and he said, "Let us dispatch," he said to his executioner, "at this hour my ague comes upon me. I would not have my enemies think I quaked from fear." After he allowed to see the axe that would be used to behead him, he mused, "This is sharp medicine, but it is a physician for all diseases and miseries." Here we have Walter Raleigh's, some of his tobacco pipes that he had, and also one of his jars as well, which contained the tobacco. And apparently his last words to his hesitating executioner were, "What dost thou fear? Strike, man, strike." And that's what we did in history to people we admired in the UK. Right, okay, moving on rather swiftly from that, we go upstairs and we go to another tragedy, the tale of the two princes. And this is from where the tower got its name, the Bloody Tower. So we go upstairs a few steps, and as you can see, it's a narrow way, and then you're in this hallway and you go through to the main area where the two princes were. And here in this room, you get a great history lesson of this part of the Tower of London. And it was the supposed murder of the two princes that it got its name, the Bloody Tower. Now what I love is that this painting was discovered only 6 years ago, and they think it was painted in the time that Sir Walter Raleigh occupied the building, but they're still trying to date it, even to this very date. And it's a painting and they're not sure if it's a man or a woman. This is what I love, we're still finding things now. And also attached to this room you have this wooden area, and just look at the graffiti on here, and this graffiti will have been put up hundreds of years ago by people imprisoned in this tower. The Tower of London, without doubt, is one of those most iconic places in London, and this is one of our series that we've done on each of the individual towers or places within the Tower of London. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do, and also check out the playlist which I've put in the top right hand corner, which is our playlist on all of the different videos we've done so far here on the different places within the Tower of London, including one of the chapels that King Henry VIII had built. We love to give you tips on places you must see when you're here. We've got one coming up a little bit later in this video, but here's another one. Take a slow walk along this area of wall before you come down from the Bloody Tower, because just look at the fantastic view you've got of not just inside the Tower of London, and here we're looking over to the palace part, which we'll have shown you in a previous video, so you'll be able to see that, but also you get to see the River Thames, and also, how about that for a view of Tower Bridge? But unfortunately, it's one of those sites so many people miss because they're racing to get downstairs to the next place. Now this is the classic view people get of the bloody tower when they're walking around, because this is the bit that you walk down to and walk under to get to Traitor's Gate. You've got the Wakefield Tower right by the side of it, which is the one on the left, that round one, and you go through by those railings there to go down to the torture section. But of course, if you come underneath here, you can see the portcullis just in front of you. That's those spikes hanging down. We'll have a closer look at that in a second. But what's also incredible down here in the vault, when you look up at the ceiling, and let's face it, as I always say, when in London, look up, and here's another case where you need to, just looking at that portcullis gate that we saw the top of earlier, but just look at all of the lions here in the corner in the decorative, well, the decorative parts of the roof, and also it's well within the centre parts. But so many people walk through here and they're just concentrated on looking ahead and not looking up. So there you go, a London visited tip for you if you're coming to the Tower of London. And then, of course, as you go out, you've got that massive portcullis gate, which we saw the top of when we went into the bloody tower before we went into Sir Walter Raleigh's living quarters. Wouldn't want to get trapped by that, would you? So did you know that history about Sir Walter Raleigh, one of the most famous people imprisoned here in the Tower of London, and what fate had in store for him, which is absolutely incredible. Anyway, that was the bloody tower, and that's probably one of the most famous towers we have here at the Tower of London. So what did you think? Did you enjoy it? Do let us know in the comments down below. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier was the church that Henry VIII had built here at the Tower of London. That's St Peter ad Vincula, and we've got a video on that in the top right hand corner, so if you click on that link, I'll see you in there.